Jessica, you guys ready?
Yeah,
All right.
good enough.
All right. I'll call to order this meeting for Tuesday, May 2nd, 2017 for the East Hampton Planning Board. Is there anybody here that would like to speak to something that is not on the agenda? All right. Moving right along to the Planning Board minutes. Minutes for April 4th, 2017. Did you have a chance to look at those?
I did. I didn't see any changes. I motion to approve the minutes from April 4th.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed, abstentions? No. All right. And then moving on to the minutes from the April 18th, 2017 meeting.
Also no mods. I move to approve the minutes from April 18th.
I didn't read those, I'm sorry, I can't second that. I'll second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? I'm abstaining.
2 abstentions.
I think probably 2 abstentions.
You're abstaining, okay. All right.
Sorry.
No A&Rs, Jessica?
No A&Rs.
All right, so, continue public hearing for site plan approval for 15 Industrial Parkway.
So he called me today and requested that he gets bumped to the next meeting.
Okay.
He didn't have his materials ready yet.
Yeah.
I motion to take up the issue again at our next meeting. We need to set a date.
You need to say the time and the date.
So it's
It's the
May 16th?
16th, I believe.
May 16th
at 6 p.m.
at 6 p.m. Thank you.
Can I get a second?
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? All right. And we're up to Fort Hill Road.
Yeah.
Now step aside.
Thank you, Jesse. Just give him a moment. All right, we're looking at the special permit amendment for 30 Fort Hill Road, 1776 Brewing Company. Welcome back. I think you have some information for us.
Yes, we do.
Name and address, please. At the podium.
Gary Swanson. At the last meeting 2 weeks ago, the request was made to get 2 10 and 100-year flood information, which I did, and also prepared the final drawing, all of which you have. I presented a packet. You should each have one of these packets. You have a half-scale, well, reduced scale drawing in the back of the packet. Okay? Which basically shows the grading plan when we pave it. The plan has been, I've reviewed this with Dan Murphy, your city engineer. In fact, Dan had a couple of last questions this afternoon, which we went over and resolved. The key to this whole thing is if you go in about 3 pages after the letter of transmittal, you'll see a couple of graphs here, which basically show that for the 2-year, the 10-year, and the 100-year frequency storms, the very small drainage area that we have in the front of this building, once we put this addition on, we're actually reducing the drainage area, or the actual reducing the flow rate. Why? Because this building area, the front area is small to begin with, and the building area is peaked and it drains off to the sides where previously that area drained off to the front. The net effect is a small, but call it, you know, it's somewhat less than the peak flow rates that you have before the construction. So pre and post, for all practical purposes, are the same. The
2 or 3?
3 storm events for the northwest side of the building, which is that large parking area that we've talked about, which has, if you look at the northwest or the westerly portion of that parking lot, you'll see this existing washed stone trench drain, which we're making a moderate extension to at the end. but it is essentially taking the stormwater flows from that area and from half of the roof, which is piped over there currently. So the only real change that we're making, what increases the flow rate, is the half of the roof that heads in that direction for the addition. Is the there's a small on the northerly section of it, there's a small 4 parking areas, paved area. That's new. That will drain down into that trench as well. And well, you've got the proposed patio, but that used to be compacted processed gravel anyway, which is very tight. And that has nearly the same runoff coefficient as pavement does. You get very little penetration through that gravel. So the bottom line is that there was only one comment that your city engineer had, was if you see the 2% pitch in that little parking area that juts off to the north, you'll see a designated high point, which I would have probably run at about 153.5. It would have been about half a foot lower than the two 154 contours. Your engineer recommended that that high point be raised so that the water that, and this is for exceptional, 50, 100-year floods, storm events. Obviously, when you get something like that, something is going to leave the site. Well, we can minimize the chances of anything leaving the site by raising that high point, which we can and will do. I've already discussed it with the contractor. We're going to raise that close to the 154. So we're only raising it up about 6 inches, but that's all it takes, because this is just a 2% slope, down towards that exfiltration trench. And he was satisfied with that. And the only other thing is the driveway itself, which is you've got the 2, 10, and 100-year calculated runoffs for that. Pre and post are almost identical, but what we are doing, what we will do is, I think I mentioned, yes, I did mention this a couple of weeks ago, we're going to run a large riprap, like 6-inch riprap trench on either side, just to attenuate, to reduce the volume, the velocity of the storm flow from, this will be a crowned driveway, and basically what we're doing from the crown, it splits the water flow off into 2 directions, splits it in half, it enters those 2 trenches that we're going to put on the side, and basically you're not going to minimize or reduce the volume of water. What you're going to do with that is to simply reduce the velocity and any scouring velocities and potential erosion that might occur from that. And Dan was satisfied with that, and with that, I'll certainly answer any questions anybody has.
You, sir, are our resident engineer. You want to fire
Well,
away?
yeah, so the city engineer said, while the 2-year event would be contained, for larger events, modeling shows filling would continue and ultimately flow, would be directed to the riprap channel on the north side of the entrance drive. So by raising this high point up, you mitigate the 10-year stormwater going off-site in the 10-year storm. Is that correct?
Yes,
Is that what you're saying?
10-year, but as I explained to Dan, you get up into the 50 or 100-year,
Yeah. That's,
it's not practical to design around something
Right.
like that.
Right, I agree with that. Most of the time for a 100-year storm, it's just showing that that there's no, that everyone knows that the stormwater is going to go off-site, but it's just like a 100-year storm when there was nothing there, stormwater would still go off-site, so it should match, and it generally does, so I'm not really concerned about the 100-year storm.
This site is actually unique insofar as there is on the westerly side, there's about a 30-foot wide berm that I think it was naturally left there. David could, confirm that. But I think what they did was to you took the loam out. You must have had good loam that you took out of there.
That site was pretty much just the way it was. I think that's just from history of farming on the site.
So that berm, that was pre-existing then?
Yeah, that was
Okay.
the high spot.
Okay.
All right, but the bottom line is there's a 12 to 16-inch berm that contains all this water. Nothing can go over that westerly ridge, if you will, which then drops down and way down, into the floodplain below.
Yeah.
So the berm's on the other side of the stone trench drain? Is that where it is?
Yeah, if you look
Okay.
at the stone trench drain, just about where the property line is,
I can see the contours, yep,
Yeah.
yeah,
okay.
it could be better identified on this, but it's about a 12 to 16-inch berm that runs the entire length of the site. That keeps nothing, even a 100-year storm is not going to go over that.
So by raising the parking area that has the 2-inch pitch in, by raising that up, you're redirecting flow into the parking lot, which will go out this washstone trench area, so it will not go down the slope. That's the direction.
Correct, yes.
Okay.
I mean, the way I had laid it out originally, just about a 6 or 7 year thereabout storm, would have, flooded that area and gone down the driveway. We'll raise it,
Yeah.
it'll cover us for the less frequent
My
storm.
only other question is the actual Caltech unit that's in there. What flow rate can it handle? I had a hard time finding that. So you've got for the 2-year storm, you've got post construction 2.46 cubic feet per second. For the 10-year, 3.82 cubic feet per second. How much does that actually take? I couldn't find that anywhere.
What happens with all of these systems is, as soon as you get a very high rainfall,
Yep.
all
It's
you're
gonna just
doing is you're filling the
shoot right
void
through there.
spaces, and then you begin to fill the detention holding area above it. And the same thing with that long trench on the westerly side. So it isn't so much that it can take like a 2-year or a 1-year, even a 1-year storm. Capacity-wise, what it does is it fills the voids, fills the
Yep.
little container,
Sediment
and then
comes out.
starts filling up the reservoir, if you will.
Good?
Yep.
Okay. Does anyone else have any questions about the stormwater plan? I'm all set with that. Thank you. Do you have anything else you want to present?
I believe that we addressed the other issues at the last meeting, and I think this was the information we were waiting on, so.
I agree. That was the last piece, as far as I'm aware. I'm at the point now where I want to go through our special permit criteria for approval, and then maybe we can have a brief conversation about any potential conditions, so we can work on the final special permit. Does that sound good for everyone? So going through section 12.79 of the zoning bylaws, the special permit criteria for approval, the first is conformance with the provisions of the ordinances of the City of East Hampton, the general laws of Massachusetts, and all applicable rules and regulations of state and federal agencies. I don't see any issues there. Pipe up if anyone sees anything or has a
I
question.
think the board just needs to make sure that the applicant's aware that they need to go to the licensing board to change any, where the liquor can be consumed, and that they're aware of that, that's all.
Definitely we're aware of that.
Okay.
All right, so I'll let that be transferred directly rather than repeat it. Next, protection of city amenities and abutting properties through the minimization of any detrimental or offensive uses or destruction of unique or important natural, scenic, and historic features on the site. I don't see any issues with that. Minimization of traffic and safety impacts of the proposed development on adjacent highways or roads and maximizes the convenience and safety of vehicular and pedestrian movement within the site. We had some of the neighbors comment about traffic, but measuring it with regard to anything else we do, it doesn't seem to be an issue in this case to us. So. Okay.
Yeah.
Adequacy of methods of disposal of sewage and refuse and the drainage of surface and subsurface water. Sewage and refuse, you're using the same methods of disposal you've used before. We've already cleared that. No one brought out anything as an issue here. I don't think that stands as a problem. Adequate means of protecting wetlands and watershed aquifers and well areas. We just went through a plan. I think that you're looking good.
The Conservation Commission commented on March 21st, 2017 that they didn't identify any issues.
Groovy.
Mitigation of adverse impacts on the city's resources, including the effect on the city's water supply and distribution system, sewage collection and treatment systems, fire protection, and streets. Anyone have any issues with any of that? No? Okay. Provisions for the off-street loading and unloading of vehicles incidental to the normal operation of the establishment, parking, lighting, and internal traffic control. We went through that at some length, and it seemed to measure up to our standards.
Can I just ask for clarification from the applicant for the decision that the last site plan showed 90 spaces, parking spaces? Right. It was 88 and now it's 90. And I just want to make sure that number is accurate in the decision.
And there was some furious counting.
So the site plan that you submitted on the 13th of April,
Is that the ones that's revised for 4/10/17?
I have it submitted on 4/13/17. Yeah, 4/10/17 is the date on the bottom of the plan.
And the 90 number came from where? From counting?
I saw it somewhere. No, here it is. On 4/4/17, it says right on the corner, parking 90 spaces. And now this one says parking 74 spaces.
Yeah, that's what I know.
Okay, so it did change between the 4th and the 13th, and you've reduced. So just to, because I just want to make sure that I'm clear. So the first plan you submitted had 88 spaces. Then you went to 90, now you're down to 74.
74.
Okay, I just want to make sure the decision has the
I
accurate
just wanted to
number.
make sure we had the right revised data.
Okay, 74, thank you.
All right. The applicant's efforts to integrate the development into the existing landscape through design features such as vegetative buffers and retention of open space or agricultural land. There's been a lot of new vegetation and plantings. I think that's adequate, yes? Any comments? No? Minimization of the area over which existing vegetation is to be removed. Where tree removal is required, special attention is to be given to the planting of replacement trees. You're not taking any trees down, so that shouldn't be an issue. The consistency of the development with respect to setback, area, placement of parking, architectural style, and landscaping of the surrounding buildings and development. I don't see any issues with setback. Adequacy of the measures to prevent pollution of surface or groundwater, to minimize erosion and sedimentation, and to minimize changes in groundwater levels, increase runoff, and potential for flooding. We just went through that extensively. It looks good.
Yep.
Okay.
Well, that's a special condition about raising the high point, is that right? Or is that what we discussed here?
No, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I've only got one left here,
Okay.
so we may as well throw it in now. I agree with you that you said that you agreed with with Dan
Yes.
Murphy's assessment. We'd like to add in as a condition that you'll be raising that as part of the special permit. Well, you'll be doing it anyway. It shouldn't be a big deal. Do we need specifics in your estimate?
I would think we would have to just, there is no, it doesn't say 6 inches or 9 inches or a foot, so I'd have to work with the city engineer to see what's acceptable for him. I don't know what it is. You're saying 6 inches, but I'm not sure if that's true. I mean, I was just working on that.
I don't want, I mean, our language has to be specific in whatever we give to Jessica to
Well,
put out.
why don't you get through and then we'll work on the
Okay.
semantics.
All right,
I'll
sounds
just
good.
make a note that you want a condition.
Put
on
that
it.
as a condition, sounds good. Well, the last item I have here then is the adequacy of the methods to ensure that the use will not constitute a nuisance by reason of unacceptable level of air or water pollution, excessive noise, or visually flagrant structures and accessories. We had a lot of conversation about noise. I don't think air or water pollution is an issue. And the plantings were the resolution that we came to, as I recall.
Yeah, but it's the city, it's the residents' responsibility if there is excessive noise that we can't police that, right? But that they've done everything they can to mitigate noise impact.
Right. That'd be up to- Assuming that there isn't going to be any change in the previous comment that we had about no amplified outdoor music.
All right. They were gonna plant things too.
Right, there's plantings that's going
Plantings
in.
are there, yeah.
There's also
But
plexiglass as well.
The
that's on
plexiglass.
Which was offered, yeah, I remember you brought that up.
I think
But,
it's,
but I think, I forgot who
East
said it, that it would be up to the people who live in the area that the amount of, if the volume goes up more than they feel applicable, it's up to them to make the calls, not coming back to us saying it's too loud.
Right.
Okay. So I heard a couple things there, and I want to break it down into quantifiable
Yeah.
issues for us.
Yeah.
We have the plantings, we know that's there. There was a
Right.
comment about asking the applicant about amplified music, all right? Can you tell us very briefly about that? Is there going to be amplified music outside?
I think if we could take the same conditions that we discussed in our previous board meeting and translated that to this, I think that would be.
So it's yes, but you're putting plexiglass in that space. Am I getting?
You were doing plantings and the plexiglass, right?
We've also isolated, we've taken away the connection to the porch, to the patio area, which is gonna be buffered with plantings as well.
Okay.
Right.
So the board's answering these questions, we're regathering this information because it's an extension meeting. I know we've talked about this extensively, but we need to make sure that we set our conditions appropriately in this so that they're going to work.
I think what Eric was saying is that there were conditions on the previous permit.
He wants to, you want to carry
and
through.
Carry them over.
do you want me to read to
Yeah,
you what
please.
they are?
Okay.
Okay, so the first one says 25 parking spots, including 2 handicap spaces, will be paved with bituminous or cement concrete material in front of the building, including the access driveway. The paved surface shall be graded and drained as to dispose of all surface water accumulation.
We have a new amount of parking spaces now, so that needs
Well,
to be updated.
but that's how many are going to remain paved. That never changed. That
Okay,
number
so
of
that's still
25 never
constant?
changed in terms of the number paved.
So it seems logical to maintain that as a condition.
The number that changed is the handicap parking, which I think is now 3, not 2.
Great.
And we'll
So
adjust that.
so that'll be changed.
Okay.
Applicant must provide and submit to the city engineer delineation of the pavement plan and demonstrate that the plan is in compliance with the stormwater pollution prevention plan, SWIP plan. So that does not need to be in there.
Sounds good?
Yeah,
Strike it.
I guess so. I mean, I don't, it's already been submitted. I don't know about
Yeah.
The SWIP?
Yeah, I
Does
haven't
the
seen the
SWIP need to be updated before construction? The last SWIP was from 2010 and had 22 spaces.
I don't know. I don't know enough about Mass.
Maybe we should
Is this
update
something
it.
you would do anyway?
We should
Oh,
update, have
there's-
them
I think you need to
update.
have it on site during construction,
Yeah.
in case there's a question.
We definitely
Right.
do. I just don't know about the updating of it. Needs to be updated or not.
So, I have a question for you. Are you going to be updating the SWIP? SWIP, hold on, can you tell me what this?
Stormwater.
Thank you.
Pollution.
SWIP, SWIP is the
Okay,
code
thank you.
name.
Stormwater pollution prevention
Prevention.
plan you have for the original project.
Yeah.
And they're required for projects over an acre being disturbed, and this isn't happening here.
So it's not, you're not planning on updating it?
No.
Okay, and it's not mandated to have it on site?
If it's less than an acre of disturbance, so you wouldn't need it.
Less than half an acre, actually.
It sounds to me like we're okay without
Yeah,
it.
so it's small,
So
so
let's
it's
take that one out
Okay.
then. Okay. Lighting will be provided sufficient to illuminate the paved and gravel parking lot, including the following locations relative to the building: on the southwest rear, the northwest side, and the northeast front of the property. Now, note that they submitted a landscaping plan, and that's part of their application packet and is referenced in the decision.
The lighting plan.
They have a lighting plan now with their site plan.
Which would make it redundant, so
It
strike
seems
it.
to be redundant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Driveway reflectors will be placed at the end of the driveway adjacent to Fort Hill Road.
That wasn't anything we thought about.
Well, that was from the last time because it was very dark out there, and the board did a site visit and found it to be
dark.
extremely dark.
I kind of missed a little what you said. That was at the very, very end of the driveway. is that-
Driveway
bottom of
reflectors at
driveway,
the-
yeah.
Where it meets.
Is that something you're
That was
still
one
willing
that-
to
That was something
maintain?
Harry brought up, I remember.
Yeah, okay, I'd like to maintain that condition. then.
We'll maintain that.
Okay, light will be placed at the top of the driveway sufficient to illuminate that portion of the paved parking lot and driveway. That's now in the
That's shown.
plan, so that's
Shown.
shown.
Strike that.
All paved parking spaces will be striped and marked, and handicap spaces will be marked in accordance with the traffic rules and orders of the City of East Hampton, Section 1-33, handicap parking ordinance.
Yep, that should.
Yeah, that should stay the same.
Outdoor amplified music shall be limited to between the hours of 2 p.m. and 8 p.m.
And there's the ramifications of that with the vegetation. And I'd like to just briefly put in, at one point in this meeting, you said you were going to keep in the plexiglass. Is that what's going on?
That's,
Plexiglass is currently on the front porch.
The front porch is going to remain.
On the east side of the porch.
right.
Okay?
Yeah.
Does that work?
That works for me. 2 to 8 is reasonable. I don't think that's unreasonable.
I
to
like
stop.
the language of it, but, you know,
It's right here. Plexiglass.
it's, you know, the devil's in the details.
Yeah.
And considering that even though he complied with our noise mitigation request from the last time, and the neighbors are still hearing music noise that's louder than they like. Considering the hours of operation, I don't know that we can really make a statement about that. On the other hand, I don't think it's reasonable that they should have to suffer because of the benefits of his success. So I'd like something in there that indicates that if what is currently planned for sound mitigation isn't effective, that there's some recourse to addressing that in the future by additional sound mitigation or different sound mitigation that may work better.
Any discussion? Anyone want to weigh in?
Well, he's got a good idea on that, but it would have to, that leaves them coming back to us.
Personally, I feel the applicant's gone out of their way, and I've seen a lot fewer residents at this meeting as a result of these
Right.
issues and conversations about how they've met. And I know it's still an issue, but I know sensitivities between individuals differ.
And as I stated before, if the residents feel that there's a issue with it, then they can make their phone calls. And then probably let another entity go to them and say, it's too loud, you have to do more, rather than keep coming back to us. Would that sound better? We don't need them to come back to us to re-establish more.
We
I
don't
just
do
want to caution
enforcement.
you to make this, I just want you, the language of the condition to be legally defensible.
I
That's all
understand.
I'm gonna say.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It needs to
well, I
be legally
understand.
defensible,
Leave
and it
that
needs
condition
to, and it
about
needs to be
amplified
clear.
music as is.
Is it daily? So the operations are Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday?
Could you repeat your hours, please?
Current hours of operation is when? Thursday through?
We're doing 4 to 7 on Thursdays and Fridays, 2 to 8 on Saturdays, and 2 to 6 on Sundays.
It's very short. It's small.
Yeah,
It's
I mean,
small.
I
So-
don't think that's.
Are we good
I
with the
don't-
condition as is then?
Yeah, I think it should stay, right?
Harry?
Yeah.
Okay.
So leave it as outdoor amplified music shall be limited to between the hours of 2 p.m. and 8 p.m.
Yes,
Keep it as is.
yeah.
Okay. Anything else with that?
think so.
Sound mitigation barrier such as plexiglass must be used when amplified music is played outdoors.
Yes.
You know, it's interesting because it's sort of a different location, but whatever, it's in there. They've agreed to do it. Leave it. We're good. You said that you're willing to leave it. Leave it.
A
and let's
sound
move on.
mitigation barrier such as plexiglass must be used when amplified music is played outdoors.
Well, I mean, that's not
Well,
what
wait
they're
a
using for
minute.
sound mitigation. They're using
That was
Both.
a shrubbery wall.
Just one sec.
I believe that was on the porch area,
Yeah.
and where they have the amplified music, and that plexiglass is going to be on the new location of the porch.
Right.
However, the music is not gonna be played on the porch any longer, it's gonna be
In the
behind
back.
the building on the patio.
Which has its own
Right, so we need to,
shielding.
we need to modify that language, I would say, to something of a,
This was recommended for conversations, people that were on the porch waiting to get in or outside just sitting.
Yeah.
right, I would think we would say that amplified music at all, any sort of music is relegated to the patio and not the front porch.
Well, inside too. I don't want to put language that's going to limit it so they can't do it inside.
Oh, yeah. Well, then they say it's exterior music must be limited to the patio, and the sound mitigation must be maintained, whether it be
Amplified.
shrubbery or plexiglass. Because there is no plexiglass going up around that patio.
No,
it's just
growing.
it's just green.
Plantings.
So how do we word that?
I don't think we need to. I mean, I think listen, I respect the complaints that have been raised, but honestly, I think that it's imposing undue limitations on
If the
Fort
shrubbery
Mill.
dies, there's no plexiglass and there's no shrubs.
Right.
The band is gonna be on the other side of the brewery. It's on the other side.
About
Yeah, it's
You
on
got the
opposite
band, but you got the whole brewery between
Yeah,
the
yeah.
street and the
I
and the
understand,
thing.
but I would want to see something that says any dead shrubbery must be replanted within
All right, maintain the
within
shrubberies.
6 months.
Right,
3
good.
months. I don't know.
Any
Okay.
dying
Make that
shrub.
difference.
Applicant will maintain a shrubbery barrier between proposed patio and paved parking lot. Is that- I mean,
Yeah, for sound mitigation.
Okay.
For the purposes of sound mitigation.
Maintain shrub barrier between patio and parking for purposes.
And sound
Sound mitigation.
mitigation. That's
And this
like
one is
saying
out,
you
the
don't
old one
want
is
the
out.
sound to go
Okay.
into the parking
I
lot.
think that accomplishes
Do you
it.
want me to read all of them again?
Is that all?
Just for kicks?
Just for kicks, do it.
We didn't totally flush out that, no pun intended, raising high point in parking lot grading.
Oh, good point.
So, to maintain storm flow towards the western and, I mean, what do you want me to say?
So,
Towards the western edge, towards,
The condition should be applicant must raise the parking area in the northern corner.
must raise, well, the high point's noted on the
The
plan.
high
at
point.
the
Oh,
high
it is.
point.
Okay,
It's
so at the
there.
high point.
Already
So
noted.
applicant must raise high point
Yep.
noted on stormwater plan,
Yeah.
Yes.
and I'll put the date in there.
Can you just tell us what you were planning on raising it? You said you were going to do it. What was your plan?
Very close to 164. We're basically
154.
54. Yeah, right.
That's called a speed bump.
All right.
The line that you see on there is the high point, so that's.
You
what
see
we-
two 154
see
contours.
it.
Basically,
They're
those
coming in
contours
like
are going to
this.
kiss that will raise that
They're gonna
up
come
to
in.
that.
Right.
Okay.
Understand.
So is that
So applicant will raise the parking area in the north, or the high point to elevation 154. So that stormwater discharges on site.
good? Okay.
You want something in there about city engineer or?
Per recommendation of the city
Or
engineer.
Or per approval? Is it approval or recommendation?
Or
It's
recommendation.
per recommendation right now,
Direction
per direction.
of the city engineer.
That brings it all together. Love it.
Well done.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so one, applicant must raise the high point,
To elevation 154.
I know, to elevation 154 on the stormwater plan dated, I think it's May 1st, so that the stormwater discharges on site per direction of the city engineer.
Perfect.
And then 25 parking spots, including 3 handicap spaces, will be paved, including the access driveway. Paved surface shall be graded and drained to dispose all surface water. Driveway reflectors will be placed at the end of the driveway adjacent to Fort Hill Road. All paved parking spaces will be striped and marked, and handicap spaces will be marked in accordance with the traffic rules and orders of the City of East Hampton. Outdoor amplified music shall be limited to between the hours of 2 and 8 p.m. Applicant will maintain a shrub barrier between the patio and the parking lot for the purposes of sound mitigation. That's everything.
The actual drawing itself is, for some reason, dated April 11th, 2017, but the actual stormwater
Calcs?
calculations are all May 1st, so I don't know what you want to put there.
Okay. I can reference both.
Okay.
So, unless there's further discussion, we're looking for a motion to approve the special permit for 30 Fort Hill Road, 1776 Brewing with the aforementioned conditions. Is there such a motion?
Well, do you have any other conditions at this point, or anyone else have anything we've talked about?
No.
Then I so move that we accept it with these conditions as discussed.
Is there a second? All right. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any
is there
against? Any
public
abstentions? I didn't do public comments.
Okay. All right.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations. We're moving on to the next agenda item at this point.
Can I just ask some questions of clarification?
Go ahead.
No.
Go ahead.
Yes, please.
Why are you running?
This is the end. I'm going to let it.
Bert Kluger, 11 Fort Hill Road. Two questions. We discussed both of these matters before, but I'm not quite sure where we ended up. Okay. Concerning sound mitigation, I heard discussion of plexiglass, but at the end I heard no discussion of plexiglass. Is plexiglass part of the permit?
Yes.
Yep.
And where's that to be placed?
Front door.
Yeah.
On the as you're walking in on the left-hand side.
Okay,
That's all
at
you
the end of the porch. Second question. I raised this last time. You gave me an answer. I'm not sure I understood it. You're marking parking spaces. That's a part of the permit.
On the paved section.
But there is no limitation to the number of cars that can be on the property.
Only in the paved sections. But no, you're right, because there's overflow.
Well,
That's
I will say in the draft decision that the board was given, I wrote that the provisions of the loading and unloading of vehicles were incidental to the normal operation of the establishment. The revised plan dated April 13th, 2017, established a new parking lot configuration with 74 parking spaces, pavement markings, signage, and landscape parking islands to which to address eternal traffic control. The applicant will also adequately illuminate both the paved and gravel parking lot to ensure pedestrian vehicular safety, as noted in the December 8th, 2015 decision and showed on the April 13th, 2017 site plan.
So there you have your answer, 74.
The 74 is the number of parking spaces. Does that limit, there can be no more than 74 cars there?
There's, the parking area will accommodate 74 spaces according to the site plan.
And if 125 cars show up, they just park wherever they wish?
If you think there's a violation, you'll have to go through.
What I'm asking is 75 a maximum limit?
The maximum that they needed is 25. They're accommodating 74. Based on the zoning and based on the parking regulations in our zoning, they only need to provide 25, which is why 25 are being paved, because that's what they're required. 74 is the total amount because they're providing additional parking above and beyond what the zoning requires. The zoning only requires 25.
Right.
They require a minimum, not a maximum.
Yeah.
So there is no maximum?
No.
There is no maximum parking in the way that the zoning is crafted. There's only a minimum number that's required.
So we could have 150 cars?
Possible. Okay, I gotta get back. We've got business now. Thank you. Do they need anything? Are there signatures or anything?
No, I still need to revise and draft it. I will send it to you via email.
Is there a timeline that they need to be
Well,
aware of?
this is mostly drafted. I just need to finalize it. I would say that I would have it done by mid-next week at the latest. Then I need his signature, and then once he signs it, I bring it to the city clerk, and you have the 20-day appeal period. Okay?
Thank you.
You're
Thank you
welcome.
very much. Someone see Jesse in the back room. You just kick him back out this way.
Thank you very much.
Check on him.
Jesse was probably last. You heard that word, kick him out. Hey, Jess. Hey, how are you?
This is mine.
It's mine.
This is yours?
It's mine. All right, you want it?
I broke it in left-handed, so.
All right, ready to move on?
Ready to rock?
Absolutely.
Somehow I lost my
All right.
pen. I don't know how I did that, but I did.
Administrative items. Recreational marijuana, board discussion on zoning for recreational marijuana. So,
I will have something.
I got some stuff.
all right, would you like to start? You've got things to say?
Is someone ready to start?
You're gonna start and go.
I don't see any reason why we wouldn't zone it, consider zoning recreational marijuana, like liquor stores, like alcohol, like we do with alcohol. Now, I know it's important that beyond figuring out where we're putting things, we need to differentiate what are the types of businesses. I mean, those are one or two kicking points for starting. What are the types and where do we put them? But I just want to put out that everything I've looked at seems to indicate that, in my opinion, the best thing for East Hampton is to simply handle it like alcohol.
What are the regulations on alcohol?
So,
Is that a good lead-in question?
yeah.
Good thing you asked.
We got
Sorry,
these-
never asked.
Right, exactly.
handy charts here, and it'd probably be best if we look at it together. I'm sure you guys have your zoning regulations.
I've
right?
memorized.
I happen to, left mine.
I don't have a page. This is going to take me forever.
I was
Justin,
in
you bail me out.
So,
note
I don't believe there's a specific category for liquor stores, so I think that's part of the confusion a little bit. But
That's
there
what I wanted
is a
to
convenience market, so I guess, I mean, that's the thing, is that there's a convenience market. A convenience market could sell beer and wine if they get a license for selling beer and wine through the licensing board.
Right.
The question is, in the future, when the regs come from the state, will a convenience market also be able to sell marijuana products? We don't know. You have also in here, supermarkets. Supermarkets also have beer and wine. They can get a license to sell beer and wine. Will they also be able to sell marijuana products? I don't think so. I mean, I don't know what happens in Colorado, and I don't know what happens in California with stuff like that. My understanding is that these are very specific retail stores. We don't have liquor stores as a category.
Or a cigarette dispensaries or whatever.
No.
That's all convenience stores.
It's all through licensing and health codes. So,
It appears that licensing is still obviously going to be required as part of this process, from what I'm hearing from the laws that are coming
local
down.
licensing? or-
State, yeah.
Right, so there's no, so when somebody goes to get a beer and alcohol license, there's two steps. They have to go through the local process and they have to go through the state process. There's no indication there's going to be a local licensing process for recreational marijuana. It's simply, you get a state, I think it's gonna be similar to medical, where you get a state license and then the local zoning is how it is dealt with in terms of its location within the local community and how it's handled.
Our medical right now.
Again, without having
Right.
anything to reference.
Right,
Our
so-
medical is set up with the UMMD and the RMD. And the RMD being the bigger of the two, which can be done in our mill and industrial, and the UMMD just being the dispensary component, and that also having highway business in addition to the mill and industrial. And it just seems to me that that's too limiting. Now, I love that we have our mills, and it seems an obvious place to put this stuff, to put it, but you know, where's the harm in putting it on Cottage and Union? That's where it really comes down to. Why is that harmful?
It's not harmful to a point. It's only harmful to the public as a pursuance that if if we say, okay, we're going to allow it on Cottage and Union Street, you know how this is going to get filled up?
Well, it's true. I mean, it is definitely a public relations issue, but I think, you know.
But we have to
There's-
set a standard somewhere.
Yeah, about, like, no one under 21 is allowed even in the establishment, never mind being sold anything.
Yeah.
Things like that
I mean,
makes some sense.
I don't even
but
know if we're gonna be able to do that, though.
No.
I mean,
There's an enforcement
not knowing the state regs. I
You've been
mean,
to some meetings.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to tell what I mean,
Direction they're going.
what direction they're going. I mean, there's at least one of the bills is talking about trying to raise the age to 25. I mean, there's been a million different things out there. So, even something like that, you can sort of have a general idea, like we want to have an age limit, but if the law changes and the regs come down and it's at 25, then you're changing the reg, you know, so like it's hard to sort of guess at this.
Is there any sort of general consensus on number of feet or yards away from schools, or that's what I've heard too?
Our
is a
medical's
concern.
200, is that correct?
Right.
That's what I read.
Yeah,
We've had
it's
people
200,
before us ask
right.
for way more.
Way more.
But my recollection is that it's a pretty broad definition, right? Because we were talking about dance studios, things like that are educational
school.
places. So it's a
We-
place
we-
where children congregate. There's something broad
There's
like
something
that, right?
in the medical marijuana, the language is something about where children congregate, and we made it more specific to say, like elements, elementary, secondary, private schools,
Right,
high
private,
schools,
public,
something like
religious,
that.
like we.
It's
Yeah.
interesting that alcohol doesn't have that. And alcohol, far more dangerous substance.
I know.
Well, there were a lot of boozers
I
back
mean, why is
then.
this being applied to cannabis? Really, where's the harm?
Well, there's
Tell me where the
also-
harm
It's a very
is.
philosophical
On
discussion.
the state level, they do still evaluate the location. It's not necessarily a strict like application of a distance, but they will evaluate proximity to a school.
Are you doing the licensure?
Yeah, but I
Oh,
believe
okay.
I believe at the state level, because you make an application for a specific location, and I believe the process involves sort of a site evaluation that would take those things into account. But it's not like a hard and fast. You know, I don't think there's like a 50 feet from a school kind of thing.
The ramifications of putting it as if it were medical marijuana, 200 feet, and maintaining the same thing we did with medical, that would make, you've got Senator Pepin, Union Street, some of Union would be within 200 feet. You've got Maple on the other end, some of Cottage Street would be in there. I know that, you've got places like Young World, Main Street, much of the center corridor, maybe not all of it, there might be
Right,
some
and
overlap at 200.
then when you include private schools, you include any young person going to school, then you got a problem there. And then you might as well take a look at the town the way it is. There's not a spot you can put one.
Well, yeah, just for the
And then
sheer
you
size
go
of
up
it.
on Northampton Street, which is a business district. That's the furthest away from everything, technically.
Well, I definitely think, this is a guess, but
And then you got Northampton and Pleasant Street. Those two streets, I think, are the furthest away from your schools, your private schools, basically.
so industrial and mill,
And then
it's my guess that there's
Ferry
no one here that
Street.
thinks it shouldn't be an industrial and mill. I mean, those are at least things we can check off the list. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you were just saying downtown, not downtown, highway business, right?
Right.
The highway business.
Yeah, you're
There's- but
talking.
remember, there's two different components. There's the growing
Right,
aspect
and
of
the
it, and then there's the retail aspect.
so
Right.
you can have a
Even in the
retail
retail
shop.
aspect, there's like 3 or 4 various options, right? Because we
Right.
still don't know if it's just going to be a dispensary like a medical marijuana dispensary, or if it's going to be, consume on site, or
Exactly.
under
Right.
the statute or the ballot question. I mean, you could have a place that's open to the public, not by age, and still have something, a medical marijuana or a recreational marijuana product sold there. It's not prohibited by the ballot question. I don't
Right,
think.
it won't be prohibited.
Well, it might be prohibited by the state regulations.
I don't know, I
but-
go through that stuff on the state, and I watch that, and I go online, and I think the state is more screwed up than we're gonna be.
Well, they obviously have a lot of work to do, but but I mean, so even on the dispensary side, it could be any number of things, right? I mean, so it
I
could
looked
be.
at Colorado.
Yeah, but if
5
we-
different layers. We have the 2, RMD and UMD, but Colorado broke it into 5. They had things like a testing facility,
Right.
what is essentially a kitchen, and they had a grow and a dispensary. There's
Oh,
more
yeah,
than
they
that.
go all the way down the
And
line.
they had different zoning for each of the different layers.
But could we consider first where we wanna say, put, where it's gonna be sold?
Well,
We'll say,
For me
but
personally,
not grown.
I think the growing is the easiest one because presumably it's a secure facility. There's no outside
lot of square
marketing.
feet.
I mean,
Right.
It's sort of restricted by its size, but frankly, I don't know that there's an objection to where you're growing. anywhere in town if it's basically a closed warehouse.
Yep.
Right, I mean, it could be a mill, it could be an industrial facility, it could be
Right.
a storefront if you can make it profitable like a building, but I mean,
I don't think it can be agricultural because it has to be enclosed by the law. It has to be secured by a fence.
Right.
There's some discussion about what that means, but, you know,
That's for medical right now, but again,
Right.
we're presuming that's gonna be the same for recreational, we don't know.
well, and there's no restriction like that for home grow.
Do we
Right.
have any indication that the people that are going to do the medical facility are going to be interested in selling for recreational?
I think most
They
of them
probably
will
will
be.
be.
Because they have,
directly, yes.
under the way that the ballot is written, they have the first ability to
They
get.
got first dibs?
They have first dibs.
Right.
And they
They
plan
have
on
So
first
it may be a
dibs.
moot point.
Right. They can sell medical and sell
And they've got a
recreational,
kitchen and a grow, they've got.
and then they can
You
grow.
know, according to their security thing, nobody gets in there without flashing an ID that's age appropriate.
That's right.
So that sort of puts the kibosh on all of the things that we're considering.
Right. And that's all we need is a locked building, and that's
Well,
it.
we don't even know if they need that. There's no regulations for that either, right?
Well, as it's written now, it is. But do we go by that now, or
Well,
are
that-
we
it's true for the
looking to
medical
something
marijuana, but the
else?
recreational, I
Well-
mean, I think it's hard to do some of these dispensaries in the way that they have the medical marijuana, where there's the double sealed doors and you show your
Man
prescription.
traps.
Right.
I mean, I think when they've done it in California and Colorado and Washington, that they're not doing that in the dispensaries. I mean, they may card you and they may have their own security, but I wouldn't assume that it's gonna be the same security requirements, at least not for recreational.
No, but I have to admit here that it's still a problem because they're cash carry businesses.
Yeah.
Right.
And despite the fact that, you know, in a community that legalizes it, you're hopefully and ostensibly reducing the black market and crime, it still has value, and the value is the fact that they're loaded with cash. I did hear recently that there, and this is really a side note, but that there's a group trying to get together to do cannabis-only banking, and hoping to have something out next year, but in the interim, it
Right.
doesn't affect us. I do think that we have to think as if these businesses that are cash and carry because of that are at least some heightened security risk, and consider what implications that might have on a community. As much as I hate to say it.
Of our responsibilities to figure that out, or isn't it their responsibility to?
Well, it's their responsibility, because they're gonna have to do the cash and carry on. They're gonna do armored trucks probably.
Well, and
their-
some of that will depend on market. I mean, I think we talked about this before, but I mean, I've lived in
What
places
are we
where the
gonna
liquor
do?
stores are behind bulletproof glass when you go in and you pass your money through and get your liquor out, right? I mean,
Right.
it's- It's a
Oh,
cash
it is in
business,
Texas,
right,
right,
so I
in
mean,
Texas.
Yeah.
You're right, we shouldn't, I shouldn't
That's sort of
overstate that.
market-based, but I mean, it doesn't mean that we're not concerned about the security for those things. I mean,
Yeah.
You can still set, but again, it's hard.
So the grow, you said, where do we put the grow? Mill, industrial, where else could it go? Someone wanted to put in another 60,000 square foot grow like the medical marijuana one we have.
Well, let me put it to you this way, we don't allow manufacturing and industrial uses at all in the highway business district.
Oh, so that's
those
out.
uses are really only restricted, I mean, if you think of it purely as a manufacturing business, they're only allowed in industrial and mill industrial.
Right.
Right.
So it doesn't make sense to allow, just because it's a sort of specialized manufacturing use, that it is therefore allowed more than other manufacturing uses. It's a manufacturing business.
I tend to agree.
So they manufacture it in one area, and they once they've got it, they just
Sell another area. just
sell
like
it
every
in
other
another
province.
area.
And on the flip side, sort of in the bigger picture, we do allow retail in the industrial zone.
So they'll
So,
grow
I mean,
and
if we think,
sell.
if we look at it from just those very big picture categories, by allowing it to continue in just the mill industrial and industrial zones is somewhat consistent with what our zoning is at this moment.
As a grow you're talking about, not a
And
business.
as a sell, too.
Well, I mean, our medical marijuana
Right.
allows highway business.
And highway business as well, because you allow retail in highway. I mean, if you
Right.
look at it from just the broad category.
Right. Well, that's what I was mostly
Retail.
thinking of, is the selling. The growing part, yeah, it would be like a spot like Pleasant Street and that. I can see those mills, and here we got 5 guys sitting here, and this is the way it is. We're all going to be growers, and now we got up on this part of town and that part of town, we got all our retail stores. It's
Yeah.
it's boggling. It's
It doesn't have to be boggling though, if you think of it just like a product, like any other product. It's
Right,
It's
you-
just marketing. And it's all
it's just marketing. So why are we sitting here worried about
Well,
it?
it seems like we're sort of, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but sort of agreed that the grow follows the medical marijuana. You know, it's mill and industrial. The residential, I think, seems it's mill industrial, not residential. I'm sorry, I mean to say retail. Thank you. Is the same thing as medical marijuana. It's mill industrial and highway business, and that's where we get to the one point of contention. You've got maybe kitchens in there, and maybe some desire, like my own, that it's not right to limit it from some places downtown, which is where people are going to congregate. They go to bars. They have. I mean, this is going to draw business in.
But I think it's important to recognize that there are health implications.
Yeah.
It's different than selling shoes. You know, that there are health implications that there are people in this world who have addiction problems and have, whether it's addicted to alcohol or whether it's addicted to cannabis, you know, there is a health component to this. So I don't want you to think of it like, you know, it's an innocuous sort of thing, that there is some implication to it. And I don't want to get that.
Alcohol, though. And we've
No,
got
but
alcohol
I
all
do think
around
that
us.
sometimes that's sort of like, it's sort of a false test, right? Because I think that we would all agree that if we were starting from scratch now, we may locate alcohol distribution places in different places than they are now.
Absolutely.
Right, but the cat is out of
Oh,
the bag.
yeah.
So
Yeah. I
in
love
some
those.
sense you can say, okay, this is already allowed, but in another sense you say, well, just because, not us here at this table, but we collectively as a country really may have made a mistake in the rollout of alcohol.
Yeah, and,
you know,
and the
that-
rollout of pot, actually, that was, they
Right.
demonized pot, really.
So I don't
It's
know
stigma.
that it's necessarily like, I don't think the
I like
alcohol
the Brass
system
Cat,
has
Brass
been.
Cat is, and Whiskers, where Whiskers is, and I like that you can go to Amy's Place. These are great
that's-
cultural places. What do we do wrong?
Well,
No,
you
no, no,
got-
but it's
you
different.
got
That's an
three-
experience. You go into a place and you're consuming. That's different than going and purchasing a product or going to a liquor store and purchasing.
Right.
That's
You know,
totally different. Or going
Why
to a
would we-
convenience
where do we
market
screw
and
up?
purchasing a candy bar is different than going to the Brass Cat and sitting down with your friends and having a beer.
So
Okay.
It's just
Let me-
different from a.
Let me ask you this: would you have put the Brass Cat, Whiskers, and Amy's Place, all alcoholic places, right there? In the beginning, when we were selling, in the beginning, we would have never done that.
No. Well, I don't
We
know.
would have never
Things-
done that.
Things naturally end up where they fit, I mean.
If you look at all the locations of where all these alcoholic places are that sell alcohol, whether it's a package store or what, plus we got the package store right there. So you got four places right there.
Yeah, but I mean, you got Cocoa.
You can
got
sit
across the
right
street,
there and get-
You got whatever the Galaxy or in Cocoa and Silver
Yeah.
Bar, and you got all that area clustered too. With it's what happens.
Right.
So a more,
So
what
are
I'm
you-
saying is a more oranges to oranges comparison though would be a facility where you can go, like the Brass Cat, to have a pint of beer, or a place where you can go and consume marijuana.
Right.
A cafe, a
Right.
marijuana
As
cafe.
opposed to
That's an apples to
Right.
apples comparison.
A liquor store
And
is
a-
equivalent to a dispensary.
Is
Right.
equivalent to a retail dispensary,
Right.
correct?
That's,
Except that it is, in fact, a little bit more complicated because then there's the possibility of a kitchen being in there too for preparation. And
Well, that was a manufacturing use, again.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're gonna
Yeah,
be
but
doing it
then
on a
you're
large
gonna
scale,
do-
it's no different than, I mean, we went through this whole thing with residential kitchens, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So, you know, and they were prohibited, and there's a whole health code around kitchens, so that takes like a whole other component to it, when you add that bakery kitchen facility.
why do you think, oh, he put a kitchen in there?
Let's,
Do you think we'd be at the point where we could take the parts we've agreed upon and ask Jessica to wire that into some language, and then we can start adding to it?
what are we?
Wait a minute, what did we agree on?
Grow,
Not a thing.
the grows in the mill and industrial.
I don't need to put that in anything, you could
already
just add
there.
that to the table
Well, I
of
mean,
uses, but we don't even
my
have a
take is that
definition
if we don't
of
start
what it is.
drafting, I mean, we're never going to. And I don't want to see this get pulled off until.
Well, this
until
is
the
the
city
first
comes out.
time we got
Well, there's
together.
way ahead of us. And
uh,
I know you don't, but I see an urgency.
But no one's ahead of us because there's no state
No, this is
regs
making
yet.
an
There's
impression on
no,
the community.
there's no,
It
but
doesn't-
this
I-
is,
I
you have,
suspect that most of
Jen,
what we're going to do is going to stay.
you have to realize this is the first time we've all sat down to really discuss this. we talked about it in previous meetings, but we never did this
Never gonna
before.
do it.
So you want to have more conversations before we start drafting?
I'm
I
open to
think we
more
have a few
input.
things that we could put down and say, let's try this, and then the next meeting, we can expound on that.
Let me be clear. I'm a busy woman. I have a lot of things that I do every day. I'm not going to spend my time drafting zoning that's going to have to get changed when new regulations come out. It's not efficient to me.
Yeah, I
That
agree.
process is not efficient.
Yeah.
I'm happy.
disagree. I mean,
I'm
I
happy to
think
put a
that's something
bulleted
we
list.
need to do.
Stop. I'm happy to put a bulleted list together of the things that are agreed upon. So when the regs do come out, boom, we have it at our fingers. We can start pulling it together. It doesn't take a ton of time to pull it together. Once we
communities are
have
doing
some
this. I don't
bulleted
understand
list
why
of
we're
what's happening, but without having a definition of recreational marijuana that you can reference a statute to, you can't even put it in the table of uses. You can't even say what recreational marijuana is, except for reference the ballot initiative. I think the only way that Holyoke is ahead of us is that the mayor has come out and said, bring anybody who you want, businesses. We've got a ton of mills that need to be filled up. We have a ton of space that needs filling up. Come on in. We have mills that have been filled up. We don't have a ton of mills left. We have one Ferry Street. The rest of the mills are undergoing renovation, and they're already having businesses like this approach them. They're already negotiating contracts. So we don't have that urgency like Holyoke because we don't have the space to accommodate it. So that's where Holyoke is different. But I think if we start to agree on stuff, put the list together of what's agreed on, have it as a reference point, so when the regs do come out, you have something that you're working with. You're not starting from ground zero.
I respect you, and I know it's awkward that we disagree, but I completely disagree. I've had many tours of our mills, and I know there's a lot of unused spaces currently.
you write the
building
zoning.
But
Seriously, take a stab at it.
And-
Right
I
at
don't
you.
have to write
You
it.
got it there.
If you feel this passionately about it, you
Right
take a
on,
stab at
girl.
writing you
That's-
write the zoning and then
I
bring it to
wonder-
the
You
board.
got
I
it.
wonder if
You
the
got
board
it.
would consider.
Throw it right at him.
To throw this out there, because I think that's a great comment.
Hit
think
him
you're
in the
spot
face
on.
with that
If the board would
pie.
consider allowing me to join with someone from the zoning ordinance and have, maybe like Salem, for instance, who's leading that committee, and have them lead a subcommittee to try and draft some language and bring it to you. You'll still discuss it and approve it and bring it to hearings and all the regular steps.
I don't think you need a subcommittee. I mean, if you want to propose something, you can. I really don't know. I mean, I don't know even if we had like a fully drafted bylaw right here. I mean, it's all dependent on the state law and the state regs. That I don't know
Yeah.
what good it would do. I mean, we could say we have a recreational marijuana bylaw, but it isn't really a recreational marijuana bylaw until there's state structure.
Yeah, but shouldn't we have something?
Well, I think we should be
Like
talking.
she said, get something and,
I think we
You
should-
could draft
A,
a
B,
purpose
C, D,
statement,
and
maybe.
just draft
You
something.
could draft, where it's allowed. You could have those two sections.
Yeah.
You could do that. In terms of the performance standards, you have nothing until the state comes out.
Right.
But you could draft a purpose statement and you could draft where you've just determined that this is allowed and whether it's allowed by special permit or site plan approval.
But that's the thing too, is we don't even know what, so we know manufacturing is gonna be part of it, and some basic dispensary like medical marijuana. We know those two things, we don't know anything really, but we can safely assume those two things will be part of it, but
Right.
everything further on the spectrum for sale is still a giant question mark too. So like, we could do those two things, where we could figure out where we are currently comfortable and continue to ask people for input and hope we get a little better turnout than this.
Well, we could
But-
also, I mean, if we did go forward beyond that too, it would just be setting a stage. And if it got trashed out because it had been ratified, obviously, at least gives us a groundwork in knowing in advance where we might go. It gives us leverage so that you don't have to do that work.
I mean, I think those simple things we can do, but I also don't know that that saves us a whole lot of time. I mean,
I don't think it has a chance of passing if you tried to pass something, right?
Yeah.
Well,
I don't think you would have, I don't think you'd get the votes on city council because there is, I don't
So
know.
much uncertainty.
There's
Yeah.
so much uncertainty. I think that's where, from a votes getting standpoint.
Is there a
might be
risk about
challenge.
drafting
Be
something?
realistic.
Is there a risk of drafting something that may not be defendable because we don't know enough, so the public would come and would read it and it would incite
A riot?
well, not a riot, but
But I mean,
but it would start a discussion where we just
Yeah,
defend
the
it,
pitch
we do know
wars.
that this is a
Stats.
contentious issue for some
Yeah.
people, right? And so, in
Right.
some respects, some of these issues that may cause some consternation with people in the community, may be eliminated at a state level. So I mean, in some sense, you might be opening the door to a, you know, argument here about things that may not
That
have
we've
to have an
written in
argument.
this, right, that we've written in this thing that we think might happen, and then the people are gonna latch onto it and start arguing.
Right.
We
Yeah.
really have nothing to defend it with, because we don't know we
And
don't
so,
know
I mean,
enough about it.
I would like to continue to discuss it, and I would like to continue to try to get people from the community to come and talk to us about it.
Yeah.
But short of sort of the basic stuff, which I think we just talked about here, places we're comfortable with manufacturing or growing and
Types of businesses.
But
simple dispensary.
I'll tell you, I have to agree with Jessica. We have to give her some idea of where we're going. Otherwise, she's just gonna pick up that book and throw it at us and say, you do it.
Don't throw it.
Well, no, I think what
All the
she's saying is
time.
she needs to know where the state is gonna tell us where to go.
When is when is that happening? What's the time frame?
So the
Is it-
timeline again is
Was
they
it
will
6
have,
months?
next March, they will have initial regulations.
Next March.
A
That will
year.
regulate and issue licenses
10
for
months.
recreational marijuana established, but not for medical marijuana establishments regulated by the Department of Public Health.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay.
Oh,
So it's a year. Can we not do this every week?
Right, no,
For the love of God.
Chris, I really, and I also think, I know there was discussion. I know there's discussion.
Yeah, he's gonna
last
have to
meeting that I
take his
missed,
heart pill.
about the idea of a moratorium, and I don't think there's any need to jump on that, but I do think that
Right.
because of the time it would take, I mean, I think the scenario where the state doesn't get regs in time for us to put bylaws in place is a potential nightmare. And so I do think we want to keep an eye on the calendar in that sense too, so that if we need to put in a brief moratorium of a matter of months to put together bylaws,
Right.
that we are prepared for that. And
Yeah,
I mean, even putting a moratorium in place is going to take meetings from us, the ordinance subcommittee, the city council, you know, it's going to have to go that process, so.
And that may not have the votes either.
Right, but I think either way, I do think that we want to keep an eye on the calendar in that sense that, you know, I mean, if we look around on March 1st and say, boy, they've got 2 weeks and they haven't done their regs.
Yeah.
That's too late for us to do anything anyways,
Totally.
right? So,
Right.
But maybe like every other meet, like once a month, we'll meet and just get an update. Maybe talk about it.
Yeah, we meet twice a month, so every other meeting.
Or whatever happened that
I don't
month.
know, I don't agree with that. We're either
Maybe
doing
things will
something or we're
happen.
not. You know, I mean, it sounds like everyone wants to kick it down the road.
Absolutely.
well, I mean, I
Absolutely
think that it's not that we necessarily want to kick it
I-
down the road, but that the state continues to kick it down the road. And
Right.
Right.
we really have to take our marching orders from them.
But didn't you just say, you know what, that's being argumentative, and I want to take a step
You
back.
are.
I apologize.
No, this is new for all of us, so.
The thinking I'm having, and I could be wrong. So the thinking I'm having is that if in fact they are late, and we don't have time to handle it, having some language in the hopper, even if it's not something we're planning on voting on, but just having continuous discussion and drafting what we're talking about so far, will help us react agilely to that short deadline.
And I agree with continuing discussion. That's why I'm saying once a month. I'm not saying let's talk about it in November.
Can I try to put a task to it though, because I feel like we could be talking and talking and talking and talking. and
Yeah, I
talking
don't
and
wanna
talking,
keep doing
and
that.
That's where Chris needs to take his heart medicine, so. So, I'm just kidding. I don't even know if he takes heart
Teasing, no.
medicine.
Gee, I thought you were doing a rock and roll dance.
So, if you wanted to continue in that way, then I suggest that the first step that you do is write a purpose statement. Because the state's not gonna be able to, that's like a local community piece to it. This is why you're doing what you're doing. You know, come up with the purpose statement, and then that's sort of like, that's like the umbrella of how everything else is gonna fall under it. So, and the purpose statement is, my understanding, I'm not an attorney, but my understanding is that if something is ever legally challenged, that's often what the courts will go to, is that purpose statement. It really needs to sort of define what the essence
What
of
are you writing?
that bylaw is. So my recommendation is, if you want to do something, do the purpose statement. And then that way it sets the framework for the bigger ordinance if and when we get those regs down from the state. That's in place, and then you can put a section on where it's allowed, and that could be done. And then, you know, application requirements, again, they may have state regulations on what's required under that. So you might not want to be able to do, you might not be able to do stuff on that. It could be just
That's
simply.
exactly what I want. Thank you.
Does
so much.
anybody have a problem with Jim taking the first stab at a draft purpose statement for this?
No.
I would love to, and I will put it out for everyone to review and cut up and do whatever you want. It's not
No, I mean, we don't want to sit here, the 6 of us, 7 of us, 8 of us, whoever shows up, and draft it as a group. That's always a
No,
mess. So
I
it's
may
easier to review and revise.
call in a friend on the ordinance subcommittee so that he has some input in it too, so that if it ever did go forward with anything, we'd have better buy-in.
Sure.
Sure.
Would you like to ask
Sure,
one
go right
member of the
ahead.
public if
Yes.
you'd like to speak?
Mr. Rowland, would you like to speak, or are you just here to observe?
Don't feel like you have
ambivalent about
to.
it.
I just want you to, feel like you got your time in.
Don't
that's all.
worry about it.
Are you even here for this, or?
We do throw
I was
knives.
here for
Yeah, right.
something
Oh, this
else.
is the school committee.
Technically, I should probably make you come to the podium so that you get your voice
You can be recorded.
Okay.
That's
You don't have
true.
to, by all means.
No,
No, no,
Don't
you're
feel
not
like you
being
have to.
I have
forced.
dinner at home.
No, you can sit
As
there.
you heard, we're not making any
and-
real decisions tonight, so, okay.
All right.
All right, so just for your record, your
On the
name
fly.
and address, please.
You guys real
Greg
smart.
Rowland, 23 Summer Street. Just having heard the discussion, I tend to agree with the idea of a little bit of waiting and seeing on this. So I think there's a lot of uncertainty around this issue, and I have, I think that East Hampton's a great place to walk around. I think there are a lot of kids close to downtown. I think it's a great place to get high and walk around. And I think it's problematic for some people in the community to embrace that image of East Hampton as a destination for doing that. I also question, what the limit is for growing in retail activity in our community. If I want to go see live music, I go to Northampton. If I want to go see a movie, I go to Hadley. Like, to what extent do we want market saturation? And to what extent do we want destination? Because East Hampton's a great destination, I think you'll agree with me, for people coming and getting high and walking around. Or for, kids walking around and seeing that. So, I have 3 kids. If I want to get product, I know I can get product. It's been decriminalized. I think for many people who voted for the measure, it was about decriminalization.
Right.
Like finally getting it decriminalized, being able to grow, so people who want it have it. Whether we need to put it up and down Cottage and Union Street, I personally think that's a bad idea. I think it's bad for business. I think it's bad for families. I think it's taking advantage of all of the public investment we've put in, like Boardwalk and all the public funds that we've spent to create this really walkable, great downtown. So, I'd like to see people with ice cream cones walking around, not people sharing. That's just a personal view of mine. And I think we're going to see more of that activity. So anyhow, it's just a personal concern of mine as a community member. I do appreciate that there are people in our community who use and who use regularly. I also know there are people who use medically. I think it hasn't been an easy road for people who need medical marijuana to obtain it in the state. So I'm sympathetic to that. But I also question, what's the rush? Really, what's the rush? So, that's it.
Thanks, Greg.
Astute.
I won't twist your arm every time if you want to keep going in the hearings, all right?
No, I appreciate you. I'm curious about this stuff.
All right.
Show up
Anything else
anytime.
from the board on this issue right now?
No.
The only question I had left was the
am
recommendation to
a-
do it not every meeting. Does that mean
When would you like to have your purpose statement ready, Jim?
next meeting?
Just get a purpose
out of respect
statement.
for
You're
you,
gonna
I'm
do
gonna put it for 1
that?
month.
Excuse me,
Meeting after.
1
Jim.
month.
No, actually, I'm not gonna be here next meeting. Go for it.
Jim,
Yes.
you're gonna have that, you said, did I hear next meeting?
Oh, I've started working on all this stuff.
How about we give you a month, because I know what it's like for next meeting, honestly.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Like,
I-
from my perspective, like,
Take care,
it
thank
comes up
you.
a little bit faster than you actually think it
I'm,
is.
I'm grateful for your intuition. Thank you.
So let's say the, what's the, I don't have my calendar.
28th?
The first Tuesday in
Oh.
June.
Grooving.
6th.
June
That's
6th.
June 6th. 6/6.
So I'll continue.
That's gonna be the
That's-
same day again that I'm gonna have
All right.
Baypack.
Anything
I
else?
just came up from Baypack.
We did receive 2. Where'd those go?
No, I'm gonna make a motion that I go home and eat.
Oh, yeah. Oh, maybe that's got there were 2 requests for comment
ZBA.
from the ZBA. I think they must have.
Thought you were
ended up-
organized.
I was. I had a second packet here, but this was in it. It may have ended up in your packet.
My apologies.
That's all right. Yeah, here we are.
No comment.
One is about keeping chickens on a residential lot, and one is for a home occupation permit for a tree service business. Anyone is free to look at these,
I did
or
have,
we can.
someone told me something about
Let me
the
see
chicken
that.
thing, is
Let me
that
see
there's a
that.
gentleman, that the
Chicken
issue,
thing has
this is
been
what I
coming up.
heard, and I don't wanna go too much into hearsay, but this is what I know, is that the problem is that they have to go to the zoning board, and it's a $400 fee.
Okay, so I will tell you, his lot is smaller than what's required. We require 15,000 square feet to have chickens by right. His lot is 9,000 something, something, something. So because of that, the zoning requires him to get a special permit from the Zoning Board of Appeals. So there's the $150 application fee. Then there's the required legal ad notification, which is required for all special permits in the state. So it has to run twice within 14 days before the application is heard. So that can typically run $150 to $200, depending on the length of the ad. We pay for the abutter notifications, the postage, so that's no cost to him. Once he receives the special permit, he has to file it at the Registry of Deeds, $75, and then the $25 for the health agent, for the permit through the health department.
So really, our fee is just $150, it's just all the other things.
It's all the other stuff on top of it. So, so his opinion of what I saw on social media was that, you know, because he met the setback requirements, he shouldn't have to get a special permit, and it's redundant, and
50 feet from.
so I told him to go talk to a city councilor if he wants to work on changing the chicken ordinance. But, you know, in that zone, he, up until they changed the chicken ordinance, which was before my time, you weren't even allowed to have chickens in that zoning district.
Yeah.
So at least now he's allowed to have them.
And that wasn't that long ago.
And he got
passed
busted.
that.
He got busted. He has
He's
chickens.
already doing it.
He
Oh,
already
okay.
did it. Somebody ratted him out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and I will
Jesus,
tell you that from the
yeah.
ZBA's meetings, the chicken hearings are the most well-attended. I'm not kidding. I mean, it's like, it's incredible how many people will turn out for a chicken hearing.
Right.
Yeah.
There are, neighbors have concerns. So, you know, I understand he's frustrated, and I understand that that's a lot of money for him to have 3 to 4 chickens in his yard to raise for his family, but that's the way that the zoning is crafted, and that's
Right. The
what he
tough part
needs
is
to do.
it's really agreements about the bylaw as written. It's not really the application of it. I mean, it is what it is.
And so I encouraged him to go talk to a city councilor if he had concerns about the zoning and wants to change it.
Thank you for
Sure.
helping clear up my hearsay. I
Sure.
really was curious.
All right.
Sure.
Okay,
Go home.
So moved.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everyone.